All right, so are you ready for this? We're diving into Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Sounds good.
We'll be using some excerpts from the novel itself, focusing on, like, Jonathan Harker and Mina Murray's points of view. What makes Dracula still so captivating after all this time?
I'm listening.
I think it goes beyond just the vampire stuff. It's the world building, the characters,
Mm.
like even the historical context that Stoker kind of weaves into the whole thing.
Yeah, it's true. And I think what really gets me is how Stoker uses the epistolary format, all those diary entries and letters. It makes the horror feel so personal. Like
Yeah.
you're right there with Jonathan as he, heads into Transylvania.
Absolutely. And speaking of Transylvania, Jonathan's initial impressions are so vivid, right?
Yeah.
He's fascinated by that whole mix of cultures in the region.
Mm.
Saxons, Wallachs, Magyars, Seklis.
Oh, totally.
It's like he stepped into a completely different world. But even from the start, there are these little hints of unease, like that old woman at the inn warning him about St. George's Eve.
Oh, that's a great example of how Stoker foreshadows. It's not just like, oh, a spooky detail.
Huh.
He's connecting the natural world to the supernatural
Yeah.
world, like hinting at what Jonathan's going to face.
Exactly. And it's so subtle, but so effective at setting the tone. Then there's that detail about uh, goiter being like super common among the locals.
Yeah.
Seems like a small thing to point out, but I don't know, it makes you think. Something off about this place.
It really shows how Stoker creates this sense of dread.
Hmm.
Like the goiter is like this lurking sickness, this corruption that goes beyond just the physical. He's already like setting the stage before Dracula even shows up.
I totally agree. And then comes that journey through the Borgo Pass. It's seriously creepy.
Oh, yeah.
The coach driver is all cryptic with his warnings. Then there are wolves all around the carriage.
Right.
It's like a scary fairy tale or something.
Yeah.
I can practically feel the tension building as Jonathan gets closer to that castle. Stoker is brilliant at using sensory details to build suspense.
He really takes his time with it. And that makes the arrival at the castle even more impactful.
Right.
You have this huge contrast between how polite the Count seems and this growing feeling of dread that Jonathan has. On the surface, it's all fancy manners, a huge library full of English books.
It's almost like Dracula's been, like, studying, getting ready for something, don't you think?
Definitely. There's this sense that he's planned everything out very carefully.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Jonathan starts to see these little changes in how the Count looks, especially at night. It's like he's seeing the monster hiding beneath a mask.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Those hints that he's, feeding on blood are chilling. And then, boom, that terrifying encounter with those three vampire women.
Mhm.
What do you think Stoker was trying to say with that scene?
Well, on one hand, it's just pure horror. It shows you who the Count really is. But it also introduces this whole idea of female desire being connected to vampires.
Right.
These women, they're seductive, but also predatory. They represent this kind of dark power, something forbidden.
Yeah. And the way Dracula throws one of them away from Jonathan saying, "This man belongs to me."
Yeah.
It's so possessive.
Totally.
It's like he's declaring war or something.
It's a huge turning point in the story. Jonathan's fear just explodes and he realizes he's trapped in a nightmare. He even sees his own reflection getting paler, like the castle itself is draining his life force.
Wow. It's like the whole Gothic setting becomes a reflection of Jonathan's inner state. His escape from the castle, finding Dracula in his coffin, totally full of blood that cements Dracula as a true monster. That image sticks with you.
It does. And it also shows how resilient Jonathan is. He's not just sitting there waiting to be a victim.
Right.
He's fighting back, even against something unimaginable. But the whole experience really messes him up, both physically and mentally.
Okay, so let's switch gears to Mina Murray for a second.
Yeah.
Her diary entries are so different from Jonathan's. Right?
Totally.
She's in Whitby, getting ready for their wedding.
Yeah.
It seems like she's worlds away from the stuff Jonathan's facing.
Right. But even so, the supernatural starts to seep into her world, too. Think about the Demeter, that ship that wrecked.
Right.
It was steered into the port by a dead man. And then there's that big mysterious dog that comes ashore. It's like darkness is reaching out to her, even from far away.
Yeah, it shows how Dracula's power isn't limited to just Transylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Lucy's illness. Her health is getting worse and worse, and she's got these really weird symptoms, like sleepwalking and losing a lot of blood.
It's unsettling, even if you don't know the whole story.
Absolutely.
Just to remind everyone, Lucy Westenra is Mina's best friend. Her illness is the first time we see how dangerous a vampire really is.
Right.
It's through Lucy that we understand what's really at stake in this whole fight.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then we have Van Helsing show up, this Dutch doctor who's an expert in all things occult. right away he's doing things that are out there, like using garlic flowers and giving Lucy blood transfusions. It makes you think he knows they're not dealing with a normal sickness.
Van Helsing is like this force of reason and knowledge fighting an ancient evil.
Hmm.
He becomes their guide in this battle against darkness, but even he is tested by what they're facing.
Yeah, for sure. And their fight to save Lucy gets more and more desperate until finally she dies and becomes a vampire herself. That's a huge deal in this story, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. When they find Lucy's coffin empty, it confirms all their fears.
Wow.
It makes them even more determined to destroy Dracula. It's this moment of incredible loss, but it also makes them want to protect Mina even more.
And they have to stake Lucy, someone they loved. That says a lot about how big of a threat Dracula is. It's really sad, but it's like an act of mercy.
It shows that there are no easy choices in this battle. Each character has to make tough decisions and confront their own beliefs and limits.
Right.
That's what makes the story so captivating, even today. It makes you think, what would I do in their situation?
That's a great point. And from here, the hunt for Dracula really starts. They use Jonathan and Mina's connection to try and find him, and it turns into a race against time. We'll get into all that more in the next part of our deep dive, but before we move on, I'd love to hear what you think so far. What stood out to you the most?
It's like the hunt for Dracula isn't just about physically chasing him down. It's also about what's happening inside Mina.
Oh yeah, because of that connection they share, the blood thing.
Exactly. She's infected, in a way, right? So she has to face this darkness that Dracula's blood has kind of awakened in her. It's like
Yeah.
a battle for her soul.
I remember that part where she asks Van Helsing if he'd kill her, if it came down to it, to stop her from turning completely. So sad.
It shows you how strong Mina is. She's willing to sacrifice herself to save everyone else, even if it means something worse than death. I mean, that's real courage.
It makes you think about free will, and good versus evil.
Oh, for sure.
How much control does Mina really have over what she wants, over how she's changing? That's something that comes up a lot in the book.
And I think Stoker does a great job of using different places to explore that theme.
Like Transylvania versus England.
Exactly. Like Transylvania represents this ancient, almost mythical world, the land of folklore and all that. It's
Right.
like a place where darkness is like real.
But England, at least on the surface, it represents the modern world, logic and science. But even there, darkness can get a grip.
Yeah.
Dracula coming to England with that shipwreck and that weird dog, it shows that evil can get into even the most civilized places. It uses our weaknesses against us, our fears.
It's kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah. And Stoker shows us this through Renfield, right? That patient in the asylum. He's obsessed with consuming life, worshiping Dracula as his master.
Oh, yeah, Renfield.
It's creepy, but it also reflects a dark side of human nature.
Like he's a twisted reflection of Dracula.
Yeah, exactly. He's like this embodiment of the potential for darkness that's in all of us.
Yeah.
That pull towards power and doing bad things. It's like Dracula's presence awakens this primal instinct in everyone.
That's a good way to put it. And it brings us back to Mina. Her connection to Dracula, it's both a curse and a way to fight him.
Right.
It's how the hunters track him, how they know what he's going to do.
But it puts her in so much danger. Those times when she's hypnotized and she talks about lapping waves and darkness, those are super important. They tell us Dracula's trying to get away by sea.
Yeah.
He's taking that last Earth box with him.
He's desperate to escape. And now it's a whole new kind of chase. They have to find him, follow him across Europe.
And they're racing against time, not just to stop Dracula, but to save Mina.
Right.
It's pretty amazing how they all come together. You got Jonathan, who knows the castle, Van Helsing with all his knowledge, Lord Godalming with his money,
Yeah.
even Quincy Morris, the Texan, with his shooting skills. They all bring something to the fight.
It shows how powerful it can be when people work together.
Right. But Dracula's still really dangerous. He's smart, sneaky, always changing his plans.
He's tough to beat.
I remember when they find his hiding place in Piccadilly, and there are 8 of the 9 Earth boxes,
Yeah.
but the last one is missing. Talk about suspense.
Oh, my.
It shows that they're always one step behind. And then, the fight in Piccadilly.
Yeah.
Dracula shows up out of nowhere. He's furious, trying to escape.
Yeah.
That's when we see how vulnerable he really is.
For the first time. Right.
He's not pretending to be polite anymore. You see the monster he really is.
Yeah.
And that fight, it's brutal. They're all working together, but he almost beats them.
That's how strong he is, right? Like a wild animal.
Yeah, but in the end, they manage to push him back, but he gets away.
Of course he does.
And then Mina has that mark on her forehead. like Dracula branded her or something.
Oof, that's a creepy image.
It's like a reminder that even though they drove him back, she's still in danger. The fight isn't over. And as they get ready to go after him back to Transylvania, things change. Yeah. They're not just hunting him anymore. It's like a holy war now. They're serious.
I see what you mean.
It's like their roles have flipped. Jonathan, who was the victim, is now the hunter.
Makes sense.
He wants revenge, and he has to protect Mina. And Mina, who is just an innocent bystander, she's right in the middle of this huge battle.
And going back to Transylvania, it's like they're going into the heart of darkness. Yeah. They have to face the source of Dracula's evil. And it's in this last part of the story that we see how strong their courage and love really are.
And that's where we'll pick up in the final part of our deep dive. We'll talk about the climax of the novel, that last chase, and how it all ends, which is kind of ambiguous. But before we do that, what are you thinking so far? What parts of the story have really stuck with you?
So they're going back to Transylvania. It's kind of like a messed up version of Jonathan's first trip there, you know?
Right.
He was so drawn to how beautiful and mysterious the place was before. Now it's all dark and scary. Even the landscape seems to be reflecting what's happening to Mina. Yeah. And what's interesting is this time, they're not just there to watch.
They're going in to get Dracula.
Exactly. They're invading his territory, ready to fight him on his own turf. They've got their steam launch, horses, weapons. They're basically a vampire hunting army.
And Van Helsing is their general.
Totally.
He knows all about the occult and how to plan a strategy. He's the one who figures out that they need to stop the Earths, block Dracula's escape route so they can finally face him.
That's smart.
But they're still running out of time because Mina's connection to Dracula is getting stronger.
Yeah, it's like the closer they get to the castle, the more her fate is tied to his. She's feeling what he feels, even starting to crave blood. Remember when Van Helsing makes her drink the sacramental wine?
Oh man, that part.
It's scary and sad at the same time. It shows how far they have to go to try and save her.
Yeah. It's like they're desperately fighting against the darkness. And as they go deeper into Transylvania, the landscape gets even worse. Snow, wolves, being all alone out there.
Right.
It's like they're entering this ancient world where Dracula has corrupted everything.
Stoker really knows how to build suspense using the setting, you know? It's like a challenge for them, both physically and mentally.
It really is. And then there's that part in the snowstorm where those 3 vampire women are surrounding Mina.
Oh, yeah.
They're calling to her, trying to get her to give in to the darkness.
It's like a visual representation of the battle she's having inside herself.
Oh.
That temptation to surrender to something powerful but evil versus trying to find redemption.
And it's Van Helsing who saves her, creating a circle of holy wafers to keep the evil away. That image is so powerful.
It really is. This tiny circle of light in all that darkness shows you how fragile their situation is. Like they could be swallowed up by the evil at any moment.
And then finally, they find Dracula.
About time.
He's heading back to his castle, trying to get there before the sun comes up. The chase scene is so intense. Horses, carriages, wolves. It's like a Gothic Western or something.
It's exciting, but it's more than that. It's about what's at stake. I mean, it's Mina's soul, but it's also like the fate of all humanity. And remember how the wolves are drawn to the chase?
Oh, yeah.
Like they can sense the blood and the violence.
Yeah.
It shows you that there are these primal forces at work, this ancient evil that Dracula represents.
It's heavy stuff. And just when you think Dracula's going to get away, the Sugani show up.
The Sugani.
Van Helsing's Romani allies. They attack Dracula's carriage, giving the others time to catch up. It's cool to see them be the unexpected heroes.
That's true. Especially since they're usually seen as outsiders.
It shows that Stoker was trying to challenge those kinds of prejudices.
Yeah.
And then, the final showdown. They kill Dracula's servants, his carriage crashes, and he's left out in the open as the sun starts to rise.
It's what he deserves after hiding in the dark for so long.
Jonathan and Quincy finish him off, scabbing him through the heart, then one more time with the Bowie knife. It's pretty violent, but it also feels like justice, you know?
Yeah, I get it.
They finally defeated the monster that's been tormenting them. And Mina, the curse is broken. The mark on her forehead is gone. What a relief, right?
It is, but the book doesn't exactly end with everyone living happily ever after. They went through so much. There were sacrifices. Like Quincy Morrissey's fatally wounded in the fight.
Oh, yeah.
It reminds you that even when you win, there's a price to pay. The ending is kind of sad. Like, they'll always remember the darkness.
That's true. But Mina and Jonathan, their love survives. It's like a light in all that darkness. What they went through together, their strength, It helps them find a way to keep going. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dracula, what do you think is the big takeaway? What should our listeners be thinking about?
I think it's more than just a scary story. It's about good and evil, faith, and how strong human connection can be even when you're facing something truly awful.
Makes you think about your own weaknesses,
Yeah.
how we all have the potential for darkness and light inside us. And it reminds us that even when things are really bad, love and hope can win in the end. But there are still some questions left unanswered. Like, knowing how strong Mina was and how connected she was to Dracula, do you think she ever really wanted to be saved?
That's what I love about Dracula. It makes you think even after you've finished reading it. It encourages you to keep exploring, to keep asking questions about this amazing story.
I agree. And for our listeners, that's exactly what we encourage you to do. Go read Dracula or read it again if it's been a while. There's always something new to discover in the world that Stoker created. Until next time, keep that garlic handy. And remember, the shadows are always listening.
And the night is full of surprises.